Hello YouTube. Scientists are trying to figure out why sleepers lose the ability to recognize sounds but become clairvoyant. You will hear about the research of American and Israeli civilian scientists, as well as the Russian military scientists. So, in a dream, the perception of sounds changes. The study, which lasted 8 years, demonstrated when people fall asleep, one of the most important functions of consciousness is turned off. The ability to perceive and somehow understand the sounds coming from the outside. Of course we hear them. We can even wake up from loud or shrill ones. Alarm clocks are an example of this. But we react initially, even in a dream, strangely. We don't understand what we hear. We do not realize what is going on in the brain at this time. Neuroscientists from Tel Aviv University in Israel have inserted electrodes into the brain and thanks to them tracked how the activity in its cortex changes during various phases of sleep, how different it is from the characteristics of wakefulness. It was not necessary to recruit volunteers specifically for such a difficult study. The experiments involved epileptics who were already equipped with electrodes for diagnosis and treatment. Epileptics agreed to sleep from time to time and falling asleep listened to a variety of sounds that scientists intended to broadcast through speakers installed at the bed. It was found out in a dream the brain reacts to sounds, which is not surprising, but at the same time the intensity of alpha-beta waves increases to a level higher than that observed during wakefulness. Strong alpha-beta waves indicate that the brain increases attention and expects something. Scientists have found that the sounds coming from outside become stronger and richer in a dream, and the brain analyzes them as actively as during wakefulness, but it analyzes subconsciously, determining which ones are really important and separating the new ones from the familiar ones. Previously, it was assumed that sounds quickly fade in the brain, and from this we perceive them in a distorted form. Our results have broad implications beyond the scope of a specific experiment, according to Yuval Neer, one of its authors. In future studies, we intend to continue studying the relevant mechanisms. Conclusion: despite the sophisticated minds, scientists still have a rather vague idea about the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious, about the main and secondary nerve connections, about the ways of penetration of external stimuli, and in general about what the brain is capable of. For example, there is still no reasonable explanation for the results of an experiment conducted in 2012. The interpretation is only mystical. They say that prophetic abilities erupt in people's dreams, something worse than clairvoyance. However, let's go in order. So, the story began actually in 2010 when the specialized scientific publication Journal of Personality and Social Psychology accepted for consideration and then published an article by Daryl J. Bem from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. The psychologist reported on the results of the study, which he conducted for 8 years. More than 1,000 people participated in it. The results show that people are able to predict the future by reacting to events that have not yet occurred. In solving his problems, Bem modernized an experiment well known in psychological practice, confirming the reality of the so-called priming, a phenomenon not as surprising as clairvoyance, but no less entertaining. The essence of the classic experiment is simple. First, some negatively colored word appears on the screen. For example, disgusting or worse. Next, the subject is shown an eye-pleasing picture. Let's say a colorful sunset or a green meadow with white goats. That is something obviously pleasant. In the next series of experiments, joyful pictures are preceded by good words like beauty, charm. The reaction of most volunteers is this. After bad words, they spend much more time trying to recognize a pleasant picture as pleasant, and after the good ones, respectively less. This is priming, or the so-called pre-tuning, a phenomenon whose existence is unconditionally recognized by psychologists. Daryl Bem came in, as they say, from the other side. He first showed pictures that had to be emotionally evaluated in the same way, and only after the volunteers gave an assessment, the words appeared on the screen, bad or good. It appeared arbitrarily without any connection with what was happening. Bem measured the reaction time of the volunteers. Some spent more time to recognize the picture as pleasant, others less. As in the previous experiment, the miracle is this: unhurried as a rule, then they dropped out bad words, as if the previous assessment depended on them. From the materialistic point of view, this should not happen. So what happened? Information from the future influenced what was happening in the present. Well, isn't it mystical? The results obtained by the researcher over 8 years were distributed on an average as follows: 53.1 to 46.9. That is, in 53.1% of cases, the subjects demonstrated a corresponding phenomenal reaction. Namely, they slowed down with an emotional assessment of the picture if after that a bad word appeared on the screen, which according to Bem indicated the existence of the phenomenon of clairvoyance or divination. If the coincidences were random, then repeated experiments over and over again would give a result of 50-50. And 53.1 is more than 3% of the miracle, quite a lot. Now, about dreams and sounds. Experiments similar to those conducted by Bem were conducted by the honored inventor of Russia title, an employee of the military department of Moscow State University, Yevgeny Radimin, and Komsomolka, or the Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper, told about them in detail in 2012. Let me clarify. Yevgeny Radimin became interested in strange coincidences. They were noticed by many. In dream, for example, that you are talking to someone. Suddenly the interlocutor runs out of the room, slamming the door loudly. You wake up from this noise and find that one of the family members actually slammed the door loudly or dropped something. Or say you get behind the wheel of a car in a dream, turn the ignition key and wake up to the roar of the engine. And outside the window at this time, a garbage truck is moving off. So what happens? The brain spins the plots of dreams so that sounds that have not yet been heard are inscribed in them. As if again, he learns about them from the future, even if it's not far away. This is what the scientists undertook to verify, to check, putting volunteers to bed, so to say. It is known that we dream during the phases of rapid eye movement, REM, sleep. They last 10 to 20 minutes, alternating with phases of slow sleep, when nothing, basically, we don't dream about anything. In the minutes of rapid eye movement sleep, the activity of the brain increases. Radimin controlled the subjects using an EEG. When he registered that this REM sleep phase had come, he woke up the sleepers. When they woke up, they had to immediately dictate for the record what they had dreamed. The trick was that exactly 30 seconds after a person was seized by the REM sleep, a sound generator was turned on, which randomly reproduced either a clap of hands or the sound of running water. Results. Volunteers demonstrated a prophetic gift in 58% of cases. Before the clap, they dreamed of scenes of war with explosions, chases with shooting, logging, or books falling to the floor. And when the water was noisy in the ears of the sleepers, they dreamed of waterfalls, a storm at sea, rain. The Russian scientist added another 5% to the indicators of Professor Bem, and he concluded that the brain of a sleeping person is sensitive to some signals carrying information from the future. Who knows? Maybe those sounds, penetrate into the subconscious. Who knows? Let's look back at 2012. The results of the experiments turned the usual picture of the world, so to say. After all, this means that the phenomenal abilities of Nostradamus and Baba Vanga are by no means fictions, and people can really look into the future. There is a scientific proof of this. Serious scientists, again, I want to repeat something, started talking about the fact that visionary gift exists. This gift exists. They started to talk back in 2010 with this authoritative journal of personality and social psychology. After many examinations, nevertheless, they accepted for publication an article about clairvoyance. This became a kind of recognition that the phenomenon should not be treated as obscure, and it is necessary to study it. Again, the author of the article, psychologist Daryl Bem from Cornell University, described his experiments that he conducted for 8 years, and he concluded that a person is able to predict the future and his behavior is influenced by events that have not yet occurred. Again, more than 1,000 volunteers took part in the Bem study. He took as a basis a well-known experiment confirming the existence of the so-called priming. Okay? And I described it as that. So, what he did, Daryl Bem, is that he set up a reverse experiment from priming. So, again, the volunteers were first shown pictures. In the same way, they had to be emotionally evaluated. And only after the evaluation, the word bad or good appeared on the screen. Some volunteers spent more time to recognize the picture as pleasant, others less, as in the previous experiment. The miracle is this: the first unhurried, then as a rule, the bad words fell out. They seem to influence the previous assessment, although they shouldn't, from a materialistic point of view. And it turned out that the events of the future controlled what was happening in the present. That's the mysticism that was pointed out. Okay? In another experiment, volunteers were shown a piece of paper with a lot of words. After an hour, they offered to remember and write them down. Naturally, not all of them were remembered, and not immediately. The experiment ended with the volunteers being asked to type some words from the first one, randomly selected and shown by the computer. And it turned out that the volunteers remembered these printed words faster than the unpublished ones. If the coincidences were random, the repeated experiments over and over again would give 50-50 result. That's how much comes out if you toss a coin for a long time and see what happens, heads or tails. And the researchers got 53.1 by 46.9. In this experiment, 53.1% of coincidences, for example, a pleasant picture, a prolonged assessment of it, a bad word, indicated the existence of the phenomenon of clairvoyance or divination. Total 3%. It's a miracle. That's quite a lot. And it shows you that we actually know very little about how our brain functions, what we see in our dreams, and whether somebody actually may interfere in the dreams. This is a study that will go on, whether by civilian scientists or most likely military scientists worldwide, and I wanted to let you know about this. So I will bring you more interesting videos about this psi, so-called PSI phenomenon, and mostly how it was studied in the USSR, if it's interesting, and the ongoing research, including such areas as hypnosis and everything related to it. But I wanted to say that what Professor Bem did, what the Israeli and the Russian scientists are studying, this proves that such personalities as, for example, Wolf Messing, the famous Soviet at the end of his life, clairvoyant, was not a charlatan, but actually knew what he was doing. And you will see in the link that I will put in the description to this video, I ask you, please see my video about Wolf Messing. It's very interesting and a very unusual personality. If you like my research, please support it. You'll see the links in description to this video. Please like my channel and please tell others. Thank you.